Sometimes we face challenges in life that are more mental than physical. Trouble at work or with a relationship, financial worries. These can be really draining, especially when you're dealing with an issue that has an impact on your life but is entirely beyond your control. I've found that usually the best antidote when I'm faced with something that is intangible and unaffected by anything I do to try to resolve it is to go out into the workshop and fix something. This is something I can control. This is something I can manipulate. And if I fix it, I can gain some satisfaction. The last time we got together, I pulled out the crankshaft from the PW50 because I discovered excessive wear in the main bearings. We'll have a look at those in a minute, but first I want to talk about something that I haven't really dug into, and that is the condition of this rod bearing. Along with the main bearings, this is the only other wear item in the bottom end of the motor, and I'd like to figure out if there's any life left in it. There are factory tolerances for side-to-side movement in the rod, but any movement in the up and down direction is a dead giveaway that the bearing is beyond its useful life and needs to be replaced. So what we need to do is very carefully check for any radial movement in this joint. The first step is to take off the piston because I might accidentally feel some movement in the wrist pin bearing and assume it's trouble with the rod bearing, and I don't want that to happen. Okay, piston off, and I should say specifically to anyone who's late to the party here, I won't be reusing this because it has some notable skid marks on the bottom side. So now, the rod bearing is isolated and I can be sure that any movement I feel is at this joint. Now before I start feeling around on here looking for trouble, I want to rinse out any residual oil in this bearing. That oil's job is to cushion and fill any gaps in here when the engine's running. Right now, I want it to be completely clean so that any movement can be easily felt. All right, it's cleaned up. Let's see how we fare. I've got the crankshaft sitting directly on the bench, and I want to make sure that this rod is in the center of any side-to-side play that can be felt. That's because even if you have a severely worn out rod bearing, if this is pushed all the way over here, it will sufficiently kink up the bearing and it will feel tight. And we don't want that. We want to feel this at the maximum wear point, which should be right at the middle of the free play. So that feels about right. I'll hold this steady, and camera girl, zoom in right here. I will try to move the crankshaft backwards and forwards, and right there. That is rod knock. So this crankshaft is pretty much worn out, and I want to make clear, this is not terrible. Even though when we clean it up, we get all of the oil out of it, and we set it firmly on a table and isolate the movement and feel it, that's a lot different than if this was in the motorcycle, soaked in oil, and I was just trying to cursorily, is cursorily a word?
Yes.
Cursorily pull this back and forth. I tried to check for rod bearing wear when this was in the motorcycle. I couldn't feel anything. What I'm trying to say is,
You look a little tense.
I am a little tense. That's why I'm doing this. It's in my bloodline. My fathers and my fathers before me fixed things. They forged parts and built tangible objects. Anyway, I could put this back together, be diligent with my maintenance, and it would probably last until my boy outgrew the motorcycle or beyond. But I'm still hoping that the crankshaft in my swap meet motor is in better condition. If it's not, we'll have to make some hard decisions. We know the condition of the crankshaft. Let's have a look at these main bearings. Here is what the case halves look like when they're taken apart. What do you suppose this gunk is? I haven't touched it since the last video. This should not be here, whatever it is. The only thing that should be in this crankshaft is air, fuel and fire, and a little bit of oil to keep everything lubricated. I believe this is some kind of abrasive, probably sand. If I put it on this socket, hear that? That will wear out any metal-to-metal surface that it gets stuck between. And it's precisely what happened with these bearings. If you have a look.
I'll have a look.
If you have a look at this, you can see how it wiggles, and the sound is crunchy. Great for your breakfast toast, but not for a precision ball bearing. And this one is more of the same. So the next step now, since none of these parts are really fit to use, is dig into this engine and hope for the best. Let's get going on that. Fingers crossed. I'm feeling good. I've got my last hope at not spending a ton of money, or a ton more money, on this machine up on the workbench. At first glance, this motor looks worse than the other one. I can tell these case screws have been taken out, and it just looks kind of dirty and neglected. But let's not judge a crankcase by its cover, right?
How did that sand get in that other engine?
The sand probably got in the other engine because it was being operated without an air filter. So if the motorcycle was riding in an area that had a lot of sand in the air, that sand would have got sucked right into the engine and caused all that trouble. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Good question. I just realized I never tried to drain the oil in this machine. What I've seen so far kind of looks like the garbage in the other motor. Do you think there's even anything in there? I don't.
Don't, no.
A pan. I need a pan. Not too bad. I can live with that. It doesn't look like caramel milkshake anyway, like the other oil. We might have been a little bit low though.
That's it?
That's it.
And that.
I won't make you clean it up right now. Okay. That's a little rusty. I should have brought the impact wrench over. Looks like somebody's been in here before. These screws are stripped out, and this one isn't even the correct part. It doesn't look nearly as good as the engine that we took apart earlier, which seems kind of counterintuitive, thinking that this engine is the one that we're going to be salvaging the good parts from. But there I go, thinking and assuming. That's not a good idea. Okay, we're getting into the real nitty-gritty here. Not the best choice of words. Unlike the first engine that we took apart, it is clean and dry all around this crankshaft seal, which is good news. Because there hasn't been any leakage here, no oil has escaped and seeped onto the crankshaft seal, attracting dirt and dust to stick to it. So, full steam ahead. And here we are. That side came off nice and easy. It's quite dirty in here, but that's kind of to be expected since the top end was removed what looks like a long time ago. What I'm mainly concerned with is the health of this bearing, but we'll get into that in a minute. On the previous engine, I just whacked the crankshaft out of here from the other side because I wasn't concerned about damaging this bearing. But since the reason I'm taking this apart is because I want to salvage this bearing, I need to be a little more gentle. A puller would work perfect for this. In fact, there's a couple of bolt holes right here that look like they were made just for that purpose. I feel like I'm taking the easy way out by using the proper tool for the job.
I'm not used to this. Are you gonna whack it with a hammer now?
No whacking.
A chisel? What about that?
Okay, hopefully this will play nice. Okay, there's the crankshaft. It looks pretty grimy, but I'm not going to prejudge. The next thing I need to do is pull out this seal, hopefully without ruining it, and then have a look at this bearing. Well, actually, it should not come out that easily. So even though it looks like the sealing surface is still in pretty good shape. Oh, never mind. Wow, that seal is cracked and brittle. Into the trash bin she shall go. Should we look at the seal on the other engine? I think this will work out to our benefit. The seal in this original motor is still supple and in good condition despite the fact that the bearing behind it was ruined. I won't argue. I'll just leave this one in place. If it happens to fail later on, it's pretty easy to replace this without taking apart the entire engine. That's my justification for using old parts that have had sand sucked through them. Moving on, now I want to take this main bearing out of the swap meet motor. I'll do it with the puller. It's actually a pusher in this application. I've got the vice grips holding it still so that when I turn this bolt, it won't spin the inside of the bearing. As it pushes out, I don't think it's a good idea to spin it at the same time. These weren't designed for side loads. So here we go. Sorry, bearing. This is the pearl that I was after all along in this engine, along with the crankshaft, perhaps. We haven't looked into that yet. There it is. Okay, that's out, but before I do anything with it, I will set it temporarily in the original case where I think it's going to eventually go, so I don't get it mixed up with this bearing in the other half of the swap meet case, which I'm going to push out next. That makes sense. For this one, I don't have any way to attach the puller to the case, so I'll run a bolt through from this side and put this plate right here. Then if my calculations are correct, I can run a nut down on here and it should pull the bearing out. Unscathed, hopefully. And lastly, I need to get this clutch side main bearing pulled out of the original case. Then we'll get everything laid out and have a look. That was a little bit of work just to get a couple of used bearings that can probably be purchased for $10 each. But that's besides the point. We got it done. These are the bearings out of the swap meet motor, and these are the original sandblasted bearings. I'm confident that these will work because I tested for any play in that crankshaft before taking them out. But just to show you a little demonstration of what a good bearing and a worn out bearing may look like, have a look at this. This is the alternator side good bearing. If you pay attention to the movement of this inner part compared to the outer shell, when I pull it in and out, you may be able to detect a little bit of movement.
I see a wobble.
A wobble. You may see a wobble. Compare that to the loose one.
Oh, that's a wobble.
Even to the untrained eye, this belongs in the scrap metal pile of history. So the final frontier, now that we know that we have a couple of decent main bearings to install, is figuring out if the new crankshaft is any good. Right now, things don't look too promising. I'll get into it next time though. For now, it's the 4th of July. I'm going to go eat some fireworks and shoot off some barbecue. Thanks for watching.